Jacob, it's been said by historians, including Victor Davis Hanson, that we're not only in the middle of a revolution, but we're in the most explosive time in U.S. history, probably ever. And the next 12 months are going to get even more explosive. Now, obviously, he might have said this out of hyperbole. I don't know the context, but it's interesting that we're now in the age of not order, but disorder here in the States. And many people have claimed that the U.S., as it's grown spiritually weaker and it's spiritually darker, that socially, morally, and of course, politically, we would be in disarray. And these are historians. These are people that not necessarily believers, but they do agree with the Judeo-Christian faith that we are in the middle of not only a revolution, but the most explosive time in U.S. history. And they've compared it to Rome. I know you've talked about Rome and you've done some wonderful messages on the book of Romans and the book of Acts from it, but give us your take on maybe their perspective and how you see it, the U.S. failing in its morality and its spirituality.
Okay, first of all, there were historians, academic historians of the biblical perspective, going back to Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee.
Yes.
And even Winston Churchill, A History of the English-Speaking Peoples.
Great book, yes.
Who understood the relationship between the Judeo-Christian ethos and the development of the British Empire and the United States and so forth. And the erosion of that is in proportion to the departure from biblical principles. There have been secular historians who have always said that. You can go back to the 1950s, and there were radio preachers before they were corrupted by the money preachers. There were conservative evangelical radio preachers warning that what happened in Rome, in Babylon and so forth, is incipiently taking place in Western society, including the United States. So this is not new. It has simply come to pass what people like Tozer and so forth were warning about more than a generation ago, and as well as secular historians. The two comments I would make concerning the opinion voiced by Victor David Hanson, who I like, is I would say it is the most serious since the American Civil War. I wouldn't necessarily say it in the history, but certainly since the Civil War.
Wow.
In terms of the division. Secondly, the second thing I would say is it is not just the United States that is in this social chaos because of the moral decline. It is the Western civilization. It is certainly not just the United States. You'll find the same climate. You're going to Australia, New Zealand, you're going to find the same climate there. You find it in Canada. You find it in Great Britain. You'll find it in all of the Protestant democracies, and including the English-speaking Protestant democracies. You're going to find the same thing. So I would not limit it to the United States. They're very America-centric. I think it is okay to be America-centric, but you also have to be globally centric. And I don't see it as peculiar to America by any means.
Yeah, and to be fair, he did mention that it was the Western society, but he was focusing on the U.S. But
in that case, I'm with him.
Yeah, and he obviously compared it to Rome, and he obviously compared it to the genuine questions were what's looking like here in the States over the next 12 months. And he said over the next 12 months, it's going to be explosive.
I'm with him.
Yeah. And Jacob, the context, of course, was regarding the explosiveness is the Trump court case. The Trump court case. But before we get into that real quick, Jay, you had a comment on it. I'm sorry.
No problem. I just wanted to mention that you've heard it a million times that America is going the way of Rome. But I submit to you that looking at it from maybe a different angle might give a little bit more clarity. The fall of the Han Dynasty, you had the emperor, the main legislative body that was interested in the welfare of the people. And then all around him were bureaucrats. So like we have the swamp, like we have professional bureaucrats, they had the same thing in the eunuch class of people, the bureaucrats. And those were the most corrupt officials, debased morally, and would do anything to retain their power. And multiple times the court had to purge them before basically the Han Dynasty fell into complete chaos and was replaced after a long civil war. And I'm seeing that because we have the exact same thing. We have a class that is around the power center that is in it for itself. I could name different three-letter words that are very, very close to the hallways of power that are all like the eunuch bureaucrat class of the Han Dynasty. Their power is based upon being around the government, supposedly protecting and helping it.
Yeah, I remember Comey going up there and doing a hearing, and he couldn't remember things. I think he said 48 times, I don't remember. Just trying to get away from ever answering a question, but continued in perpetuity what is going on with the intelligence agencies.
Yeah, Comey is a moral eunuch.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way you have to put it.
The
That's
parallelism that James raises with the Han Dynasty, the last dynasty, is exactly correct. This is going, of course, back before Chiang Kai-shek and so forth. He's exactly correct. But what I would additionally point out, affirming what James said, is Daniel chapter 6, during the reign of Darius the Mede. Then Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. Then the commissioners and satraps, the eunuchs of that era, that is, and some of them actually were eunuchs, we know from the book of Esther, the bureaucracy, the deep state, the equivalent of that era, began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel in regard to government affairs, but they could find no ground of accusation of evidence or corruption against him, inasmuch as he was faithful, and no negligence or corruption was found in him. And these men said, "We'll not find any ground of accusation against this Daniel unless we find it against him with regard to the law of his God." What happened in the book of Daniel is what is happening now. The real target
It's
the Judeo-Christian faith.
Amen. Well, I think that you're on the money on that, Jacob, and we're going to be talking about that absolutely on Backstage, because that's where it's headed. That's where it's headed. Don't get me wrong. I think all these things are happening to conservatives, to people that don't support the left, are part and parcel of it. But the ultimate target, like Jacob said, it was Daniel. It was born again believers, Bible believing Christians.